AverMedia is a brand you might be familiar with if you've been in the streaming content world for a while, but it's also possible you've never heard of AverMedia because they do seem to fly a little under the radar, at least for me they have. They make webcams, capture cards, some software solutions, and audio gear like the microphone we're taking a look at today. This is the Live Streamer Mic 350, a USB condenser microphone with loads of software customization options for $179. Before we dive in, I want to mention that AverMedia sent me the Live Streamer Mic 350 for the purpose of reviewing it. I was not paid to make this video, and AverMedia has no input on my review. I do have an Amazon affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the Streamer Mic 350 and you'd like to support this channel. All right, let's get right into testing the AM350 because we've got a lot of things to test, especially in the software. The audio you're hearing is being recorded in 24-bit 48 kilohertz using Audacity, and no post-processing will be applied other than normalizing the level with a limiter applied to prevent clipping. All right, let's review the specs to start off here. The AM350 is a condenser microphone with a cardioid and an omnidirectional polar pattern, and USB is the only output. It's a side address microphone, and the metal mesh grill doesn't have much give. It feels nice and sturdy. It comes attached to the mount, which swivels, and there is a desk stand included, but it sits pretty low on your desk, so I'd recommend using a boom arm to get it closer to you unless you happen to have a desk that's a height like this and you sit at a height like this, because this distance is not so bad. But if you have more of a typical desk height, or if you're taller and you're going to be further away, definitely get it on a boom arm. Now, on the bottom of the microphone, you'll find the USB-C port and the 3.5mm headphone jack for monitoring, as well as the switch for the polar patterns. On the front of the mic, you have two dials. The top dial controls the microphone gain, and it mutes the mic when you press it. The bottom dial controls the headphone volume and also switches between direct monitoring and system playback when pressed. The frequency response is 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and the conversion rate is 24-bit up to 96 kHz. I'll put all the specs on the screen so you can pause the video here if you want to check them out, but there's nothing here that really stands out that needs to be discussed. All right, now let's do our tests without any of the Vibe Engine software processing applied. This is just going to be the raw sound of the microphone, and we'll start by testing out these polar patterns. Currently, I have it in the cardioid polar pattern, so if I turn the microphone around, it's going to drop off, or my voice is going to drop off. Now I'm on the side. Now we're rotating around to the back of the microphone where we should not be picking up much. Back to the other side, and then rotating back to the front of the microphone. And now I have switched it to the omnidirectional polar pattern, so as I rotate the microphone around, we should not hear too much of a change in the sound of my voice, as well as how much of it it's picking up, because it should be picking it up from any direction 360 degrees around the microphone. But let me know in the comments what it sounds like to you. Apologize if there's handling noise on this. I just didn't have a better way to rotate the microphone. Now let's test the mute button really quick here, so I'm just going to keep talking. I'll press the mute button again to unmute. We'll press it, and then we'll unmute one more time. Let me know down in the comments, was that audible when I was pressing the mute button on and off? All right, now we're going to test for shocks and bumps, first with it on its desk stand that's provided, and then we'll get it on a boom arm and see if there's any difference there. Now, importantly, this does not come with any type of shock mount, but AverMedia does actually sell a shock mount separately for it if you find that you need a shock mount. But let's start by tapping on the desk here to see how much of the vibrations are picked up by the desk stand. And now we've got the AM350 on a Rode PSA 1 Plus boom arm, so we'll tap the desk again to see how much of that it picks up, and then we'll tap the boom arm, see how much of that it's picking up. We'll tap the yoke and tap the microphone here. Now here's a keyboard typing test with the AM350 positioned directly in front of the keyboard and directly in front of me, but it's set a little bit of a distance to me. This is most likely not the best position for the microphone even without the keyboard. However, just wanted to give you a sample of what keyboard typing sounds like if you do have it in this position. And now we've got the microphone on a Rode PSA 1 Plus boom arm to see if that makes a significant difference for the typing sounds. Getting it off of the desk and a little bit closer to your mouth is a good idea in general, just for better sound quality and less ambient sound, but how much of a difference does it make with the keyboard sounds? These are linear switches on a mechanical EpoMaker keyboard. Now the AM350 does not come with a pop filter, but AverMedia does sell one separately. Honestly, it needs a pop filter. You don't necessarily have to buy the one that AverMedia sells, but even if you have good mic technique and talk past it like this without directing that air directly into the capsule, it's still easy to accidentally just make a slight movement, and before you know it, please pick my podcast. You're getting some pretty bad plosives going there, so I do recommend a pop filter. All right, now let's just demonstrate the difference in sound at different distances here. This is 5 inches away from the corner of my mouth, and this is how it's sounding in my space. Now the microphone's about 11 inches away from my mouth. This is approximately the distance it would be on a desk stand, and this is how it's sounding. And now this is how it sounds if you're 20 inches away from the microphone. Don't do this. This is just going to sound awful. And now I'll just do a quick test to see how it picks up background noise that's nearby without any of the software processing turned on. So we don't have any of the noise reduction or noise gate or anything turned on. Again, this is still just the raw sound of the mic. I'm going to turn on some fan noise that I'm just playing on my phone here. It's not in the direct pattern of the cardioid polar pattern here. I will now switch it to the omnidirectional polar pattern. And now it's likely going to pick up a bit more of that fan noise because it is picking up sound from 360 degrees. Now we will switch it back to cardioid. Now we're back in the cardioid polar pattern, just so you can see what difference that makes without any of the noise reduction turned on. All right, before we jump into the software, let's do a quick comparison to a few other condenser microphones on the market that have USB connectivity. The first microphone in this comparison is the Sennheiser Profile. What it has in common is it is a USB-only condenser microphone. What it doesn't have in common is that it is a no-frills, plug-and-play, no software, no fancy processing, just your basic USB microphone. It does have some physical controls for microphone mute, microphone gain, headphone mix, and headphone volume, so it does have a nice set of physical controls on it. The Profile comes in at a price of $129, so there's a little bit more of a budget-friendly option, which doesn't have any of the fancy software features. All right, now at the same price as the Sennheiser Profile, I think what we have is probably going to be the best, more budget-friendly alternative to the AM350, and that is the Elgato Wave 3, which has been out for a while, but is still a really good microphone for the money. The Wave 3 has some physical controls on it, just like the AM350 for mic gain, headphone volume, and monitor mix, but it also has the Elgato Wavelink software, and that gives you the ability to add real-time processing that is done in the software, not on the microphone, so you do need the software running just like the AM350 if you want processing, but it's also fully featured software for mixing and custom routing, so it's actually quite powerful for streaming. So there you go, an audio sample of the Elgato Wave 3 compared to the AM350, both microphones that offer some extensive options in the software, but the Wave 3 comes in at $129, while the AM350 comes in at $179. Next up, we have the Rode NT USB Plus. I would consider this probably the most direct competitor to the AM350 because it is right in the same price range at $169. It is just a tad less expensive, and it also comes with this pop filter, which is very helpful and effective. But the features are also similar here. We have a couple physical controls on the microphone. We also have some DSP features available. It's not quite as robust in terms of the number of DSP features as what's available with the AM350. However, the DSP here is retained in the microphone. So if you turn on DSP using Rode Central, and then you disconnect the NT USB Plus and plug it into a new device, that DSP will be retained. The settings stay the same. Both mics have 24-bit depth conversion. However, the NT USB Plus maxes out at 48 kilohertz, whereas the AM350 goes up to 96 kilohertz. So there you go. Let me know in the comments which of these head-to-head competitors you like the sound of better without any of the processing applied. And the last microphone in our comparison is the Rode NT1 5th Gen. Now, this one has way fewer features. However, it does have a couple things going for it. This microphone is priced at $250. It does have both USB and XLR connectivity, but that's pretty much where the extra features end. There is no DSP that's built in for processing. There are no physical controls on it. There's not even a headphone output for monitoring, so to monitor, you would have to do that through your computer. However, what you do have here is a microphone that has a more neutral frequency response that doesn't have as much of a presence boost or low-end boost. It also has 32-bit float conversion over the USB connection. So as long as you have your computer set to record in 32-bit float, you can actually record 32-bit float straight from the microphone, which is pretty cool. So I wanted to include this one here because it fits some use cases that the AM350 doesn't really fit for. And at the same time, there are some use cases like live use where you want real-time DSP that the NT1 5th Gen doesn't fit as well for. All right, we're not going to spend a long time on the software because there is a lot here. However, I do want to just go through the basics of some of the processing that's available and what that sounds like. There are a few different ways to go about applying processing here. The simplest and most straightforward is the scenario. So on the left menu, one of the options here is scenario. You can also see scenario down here in the sort of main display area. And if we go to the scenarios and turn scenario on, we have a few different scenarios here. We have podcast, which is on right now. We have chat, which I can switch it to that. Then we have singing, and we also have instrument. So this is controlling all the processing. It's sort of like a quick, easy preset intended to just simplify things for you. So you can turn that on from this left menu with the toggle button, or you can turn it on simply by clicking on it down here in the main display area, and you can click on it again to turn it off. In this main display area, you also have a slider for where it says mic voice. That is the mic gain level. I have found that the gain on the AM350, at least when connected to a Mac, I would call it fairly hot, meaning I need to turn it down quite a bit to keep from having any clipping. To the right of that, you have your monitor mix where you can see that you can change these sliders for the microphone sound and the system sounds. You also have a button here which when you turn it on, sometimes you'll get this pop-up. I need to turn it back off because, as I'll mention later, there is quite a bit of latency introduced when you have this option turned on. Now, the menu all the way back over on the left continues with additional processing, but before we go into that, let's just look at the processing buttons that are available here in this main display area. Next to scenario, you have an option for noise suppression. Now, when you select these buttons here on this main display area, if you don't have that side menu open, it really just turns things on or off. So right now I've got noise suppression, noise gate, and echo cancellation on. I'm going to turn echo cancellation off there. We've got effects, we've got compressor, EQ, and then clipping shield. All of these things can be turned on just by clicking these. However, clicking on these does not open up the more detailed controls. However, if you want to actually see what you're controlling here, you need to come back to this left menu and go to the different sections. So if we start by going to noise reduction, we've got 3 tabs here. The first tab turns echo cancellation on and off, just so you can see what that sounds like when I turn that on. No other processing, just echo cancellation. Now we'll turn on the AI noise reduction. Here is what that sounds like. So if I leave that on, I can move over to the noise gate. The noise gate, when we turn that on, has several more controls here. So we can actually control when it opens, when it closes, the attack, hold, and release. We'll turn that one back off. And then the last tab here is the de-esser. Notice there is no control in the main display area for de-esser, but there is here. So we'll turn the de-esser on and see what that sounds like. All right, so now we've got the noise reduction and the de-esser turned on. If we hop over to the next menu section under voice effects, here we have 4 tabs. The first one is the effects tab, where now we can control the pitch, the echo, and the amplify effect. The next tab is reverb. We can turn reverb on and change some settings there. Then we have the compressor here. For the compressor, we can turn that on. We can also turn on a limiter independently. However, notice the clipping shield button did not illuminate, so that appears to be a separate control somehow. We will leave the compressor turned on, and then the last tab here is the EQ. If we turn that on, it does illuminate the button. You can save a preset. You can pick from several presets here. Here is the sound of brighter and bassy. And then if we go to the preset here that I saved, if we click on advanced, we have this type of an EQ where we can control sliders at different frequencies. So this is the EQ that I personally set up and saved under my favorites. We'll leave that one on and we'll go to the last option in the left, which is the voice changer. When we turn this one on, we can pick from robot, we can pick man, we can pick
woman.
There are several more that you can select here. However, you do have to register for an AverMedia Vibe Engine account. Once you register and are signed in the app, then these other ones will become available.
So we'll turn that one back off. And now we are back down to, we have noise suppression on, compressor on, and we also still have the de-esser on as well, which you don't have an indication for over on the right. All right, now we've got the Windows version of the Vibe Engine software open. All right, so the main thing I want to show in the Windows version of the software is up here in the top right corner where it says mixer mode. Now, when you click that at first, you're going to get this pop-up message just to verify that what you're doing. And what you're doing here on Windows with mixer mode is this is how you're creating the virtual sound input-output channels. So when we turn this on, now what we're going to have is that virtual audio input channel that we can use. However, it's not just creating a virtual channel for your audio output from the Vibe Engine software. You're also getting the ability to create custom mixes here. And so that's pretty cool. As you can see on the right side, you've got audio inputs. We can see the AM350 mic here. We can click the drop down to select different audio inputs. We have controls over the level and the VST effects. The system sounds are here. We can change the level of the system sounds on the input. We can click the plus to add a new media input device. And as you can see, it doesn't appear to be limited to only the AverMedia hardware. On the left side here, you've got your output. You've got your streaming output here. You can click the plus sign underneath here to add a new mix. For example, you can do audience mix. And as you can see, what that does is it creates a new sort of level here. So our audience mix can now have a custom number of inputs here on the right side. And you can actually link or unlink these so you can control them individually, which is pretty cool. So like I said, I'm not going to go deep into this. I just wanted to show that the Windows version has this more advanced mixer mode for doing your custom routing. All right, now let's cover some pros and cons based on my experience with the AM350, starting with pros. First of all, the sound quality without the processing is quite good, and the self-noise is not bad. It's less full sounding in the low end than the NT-USB Plus and a little bit more mid-forward, but with some EQ and some post-processing, you can still get a pretty nice sounding voiceover out of it. Of course, a little bit of noise reduction in post to help reduce that noise floor a little bit. Here's a quick sample of the raw sound and then some post-processing applied the way I would normally process a voiceover for one of my videos. The Halo 75 V2 is a 75% layout keyboard with 83 keys and an ANSI layout. The construction includes an aluminum top frame and ABS bottom. There are 5 color options available, including ionic white, obsidian black, blue, pink, and green. Another pro is all of the physical controls. I like that you can control the mic gain with a physical dial because that makes it easier to use it with mobile devices. And it's always nice to have the headphone volume control, and then you've got the polar pattern control. All of that's on the physical mic, which is nice. Another pro is the headphone output here. It's pretty good. It's not amazing. I still think the Elgato Wave 3 is the cleanest sounding headphone output of the condenser mics that I have that are USB, but it's certainly not the worst I've ever had. It's not distracting. There isn't a super high level of hiss in the headphone output, so it's definitely usable. Also, having the additional polar pattern here definitely counts as a pro, even if you don't plan on using omnidirectional often. It's nice to have it there as an option in case you run into a scenario where it is useful. The build quality is also good. My only real complaint about the build is the dials. They don't have a consistent feel. They're just generally not the best feeling dials ever, but the build quality of the body and the mesh grille, all of it feels very solid. Also, the shock rejection without a shock mount is actually not that bad. Considering it's a condenser mic with no shock mount, I expected it to be worse, honestly, so I count that as a pro. Now, the software that's included has both pros and cons. So as far as pros go, I will say that just having software available for free is a pro, and some of the processing can be useful in a live setting. Specifically with the processing, I found the real-time noise reduction to be effective, and while it does noticeably affect the audio quality, it doesn't destroy it totally. So if you do have background noise in a live setting where some background noise reduction would be helpful, I think it would be worth using it. The EQ feature also worked well, and the de-esser also seemed to work reasonably well. So those three, to me, are effective. They do what they're supposed to do, and they don't super over process the sound as far as I can tell. Let's stick with the software and the processing here as we move into the cons. So the software in general has some confusing navigation with processing that appears to be duplicated in some places, like the limiter and that, the clip guard function there. They seem to work independent from each other, but they should in theory be the same thing. So overall, I think the navigation and the UI of the software could be improved. Now, some of the individual processing features are also not as usable as others. For me, the echo cancellation is completely unusable. It actually seems to add echo rather than eliminate it. The big con for me with the processing, though, is that while I was recording all of my tests with it and playing back the recordings, I always seem to hear a little bit of distortion with the processing turned on, even when I had the limiter on or that other clip prevention feature, and my levels were turned down plenty low to not have any clipping at all, and I could never pinpoint it to one individual effect, one particular bit of the DSP. Now, to be clear, it wasn't to the point where I think it makes it totally useless in a live setting. As I mentioned in the pros, I would still personally use the EQ feature, the noise reduction, and the de-esser in a live setting if I had background noise. I think though for recording purposes, if you're going to record this, for use in a video, for use in a podcast, or certainly for a voiceover, something like that, and then you're going to be normalizing that level up pretty high in post, I would just do all of the processing in post. Now, continuing with cons, I'm also never a fan of having some features limited to one operating system. So it's a bummer that all of the mixing and routing features of Vibe Engine are for Windows only. I'm not sure if that'll change in the future, but Mac users currently don't get any of those features. Also, if you want to include processing in your monitoring, it introduces some pretty significant latency. It's just distracting. It was hard for me to listen to the monitoring with that turned on. It's very noticeable how much latency there is, and it gets distracting. The last con that I'll mention is that it doesn't come with a pop filter, and I do think it needs one, especially considering the target market here. I mean, it's called the live streamer microphone, so it's intended for live scenarios. And in live scenarios, if you're gaming or streaming, it's likely that you're not paying super close attention to your mic technique. So you're probably going to accidentally put a plosive directly into the capsule. So I think for the price, it probably should have just included the pop filter. All right, so overall for the price, would I recommend the AM350? Well, it kind of depends here. The number of software features, especially for Windows users, make it a fairly enticing offering for the price. And the mic itself, without any processing, performs pretty well. But once you add a pop filter to it, which again, I do think you probably need, you're looking at around $200 here compared to $169 for the closest competitor, the Rode NT USB Plus, which includes the pop filter, so you're set at that price. So if you're in the market for a USB condenser microphone to use in a live setting where real-time DSP is necessary, especially if you're a Windows user, then I would consider the AM350, but then again, I would still also consider the Elgato Wave 3 because their software is well baked, it's easy to use, and it lets you do a lot as well. Now, if the AM350 here were to drop to, say, $140 to $150, then I'd probably consider it more strongly. So at the end of the day, while this is not a poor quality offering by any means, I don't think it's necessarily the best choice for a super broad range of users just because of the competition that's on the market. That being said, if you come across the AM350 at a reduced price, then I would keep it on your list to consider. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the AM350 from AverMedia. Let me know if you have one and how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech and Gear channel, and while you're here, why don't you check out one of these videos? I'm sure you'll like it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.